Sweet Success is brought to you by Hospitality.fm, the podcast network for hospitality professionals.
I'm Chris Holdren, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I am thrilled to have on the show the incredible Chris Holdren. Most recently, Chris worked at Caesars Entertainment, first as the EVP Chief Marketing Officer, and later as co-president of Caesars Digital. But I met him back when we were working at Starwood Hotels Resorts, a company where he spent 15 years of his illustrious career, holding various roles throughout marketing, digital, loyalty, partnerships, and operations. Before joining Starwood, Chris oversaw creative development and production at the Walt Disney Company, Parks and Resorts Online. He's known for driving engagement, loyalty, and profitability for some of the world's most recognized brands. Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
Katie, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for that warm introduction. Honestly, I've just been very fortunate to work with a lot of very talented people, and we've been able to accomplish some really great things.
Well, I know I covered a lot in that introduction, but I'd love to go back to the very, very beginning and hear from you how you got started in hospitality.
You know, it's a funny story. It was kind of in my blood, I would say, in the sense that, my grandfather immigrated from Holland to the United States in the early 20th century. And his original plan was to go out to California and become a farmer. And then the Great Depression hit, which forced him to move him and his family back to the East Coast. And on the way, they started staying at these little roadside inns and little motels, truly. And when he arrived back in Virginia, he had come up with a new business plan, and he actually opened 3 different hotels. So growing up, even though he passed away when I was very little, I grew up in and around those properties. So I'd be behind the front desk and getting really entranced with, all the little key boxes and the mailboxes and how the motels operated. And so I kind of, that was just part of my childhood, was being around these hotels. And then, I went to the Walt Disney Company to produce video games and get involved in the internet. And through that, came back around to Walt Disney Parks and Resorts Online, where I started working with the theme parks. And then that led to the job I eventually came to Starwood. So, but when I came in, it kind of has been with me my whole life, in some ways.
I never knew that about you. Did you ever think, oh, I could do that too? Or were you like, oh, I'm going to go into video game development. I'm going to do my own thing. This is modern age. Like how did that play into before you got to Starwood? Did you think it was a viable career path for you?
I really didn't. It's one of those things you grow up. I mean, in hindsight, it's kind of, makes all the sense in the world. But when I was living it in my early 20s, that wasn't on my mind really at all until the opportunity truly with Starwood came to be. And I did keep, in my office at Starwood, I kept a framed picture of him. So I would, use him kind of as a source of inspiration for a lot of the things that we did. And just he was kind of my North Star as I thought about what we should do at Starwood.
Oh, that's beautiful. Are the motels still in the family to this day? Do they still exist?
They're not. They're not.
No.
It was one of those cases where, for a very small group, with 3 different properties, and then the changing brand standards, just the cost to stay up to date with all the brand standards made them kind of not feasible to keep running. And so now I think one is a Best Buy. I'm not even sure what the other 2 are, but but they are long gone, but still live on in our memory.
And so interesting because you really then saw from the other side, from the hotel owner side, about how those brand standards affected the day to day. Obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, you were with Starwood for 15 years, which we'll talk about later, why that is, I guess. But tell me first, like, what was your first job at Starwood?
My first job at Starwood was coming in as a senior director of digital strategy. So it was 2001. We did have, the company had really just formed a few years prior to that. We were still on different web platforms for each of the brands, primarily Sheraton and Westin. It was this chance to really harness everything we were seeing online and reinvent the platform and advance our capabilities and help us start driving a lot of direct bookings through digital channels. So it was an exciting time to come in and be a part of digital at a company that was as transformative as Starwood was.
Yeah, and perhaps it's that transformation because, from when you started through when the company no longer existed anymore, there was lots of transformation during that time. But what was it that made you stay at the company for so long? Something that was very common at Starwood. I think it speaks to the strength of the organization. And obviously you held various roles there, but what was it that made you say, there's so much more to still be done here?
First I'd say it was the people, right? I think one thing that's really underappreciated about the hospitality industry is that generally the people who work in hospitality are hospitable, right? They're great people who care about other people, who care about the experiences that other people have. And that's what draws people to work in hospitality. And so you're working with just, and at Starwood in those days, it was just an incredibly talented group of people with very diverse backgrounds, because part of Barry's, original strategy was, let's bring in people from outside the industry, match them up with people who are industry experts, and let's see what kind of innovation we can drive in kind of this old school hospitality industry. And that melding of different experiences really created just that tremendous opportunity to drive growth and to do things that were exciting and different and drive a lot of innovation.
I felt that too. It was the first place that I worked that I thought I could work here forever. And it wasn't, this one job that I could be in forever, but we had such a global footprint of corporate offices, of individual hotels. I thought the people we worked with were just so brilliant. And I often felt like the least intelligent person in the room, which I found the growth that helped me professionally to become better and better and better every day was just astronomical.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I expected to retire at Starwood, right? Like I had no plans to leave until suddenly there was the Marriott acquisition and the entire company changed. But, the other thing that I think, looking back on it and on that time that really has stuck with me and I think made me a much better person overall is just that global reach and working with people, getting to know people from all over the world, traveling, to so many different countries. I know you and I have both been to places like Bhutan, which was an amazing and just, life-changing experience, or, spending a lot of time in China and the Middle East and, Europe and South America and literally everywhere under the sun. It really has stayed with me to get that exposure to people with such diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of my favorite projects that we worked on together was the launch of keyless entry. Obviously, something that's much more commonplace today, particularly in the short-term rental industry, but I think it's not superfluous to say revolutionary to the hotel industry at that time. Can you talk from your perspective about how that project began?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was really exciting to be a part of that effort. And really it all started, first I'd say mobile had a really big impact on the travel industry, obviously. At the time, with the devices that were coming out, it was so exciting to be kind of at the forefront like Starwood was in the hospitality space with mobile. And we had developed this concept called State Aware, which unlike other travel apps, like we figured that, from the device, we knew where you were. We knew when you got in market. We knew how far away you were from the hotel. We knew all of this. We had all of this information to be able to actually embed in a mobile app that would enhance your experience when you were on property. So it was the first time that it went kind of beyond just the booking process and actually could extend. Digital's effect could really extend throughout your entire stay. And so we had built this into the app. It was incredibly well received by our guests. The entire app experience would change to highlight your home away from home when you were actually staying with us in one of our brands. And the next step for that was, you start to see people in other industries, the phones actually controlling parts of your experience. And I had ordered, for my house, a new lock that I could open the front door to my house just using my phone without a key. And it was really kind of a light bulb moment to say, if we can do this in our homes, we should be able to do this in the hotel industry. And it just continues to.
You had a essentially keyless lock for your house before we even launched keyless entry for Starwood?
I did. They had just come out.
Talk about an early adopter, Chris. I thought I was pretty cool when a year ago I put one into one of my short-term rentals, but that has to be how many years ago now?
It was quite a few years ago. Yeah. It was a long time ago. But so then that led to a project of discovery where we called, we had two main lock providers, maybe three. We reached out to them to understand if they had any technology in the works that would help us enable this. One of those lock providers, Assa Abloy, came forward. They had been working in the background on some technology that they thought would be applicable, that we could put in our hotels. And it just started this comprehensive effort that really touched, not just digital and the mobile app, but property technology and, how the systems we needed to have inside our hotels. It touched property operations. Like, how would this change the entire check-in experience and check-out experience? And, where would we take this? And it even, got to, our funding and how we would, actually make it happen. Because one of the, early things that we recognized was this wasn't a technology we could just put in one hotel here, another hotel there. In order to have an impact and actually make it a promise, we needed to make it a brand-wide initiative. So that's where we took a Loft and Element, which were being led by Brian McGinnis, who's a visionary. And they were new builds, new brands. So it was really easy from a property or I shouldn't say really easy, but easier from a property technology perspective to go in and adjust all their door locks and replace them. And then we chose W as well, just given its, brand positioning and it being so tech forward, and everything that, and the parent brand of a Loft in many ways. So, we settled on those three brands and then set about making it come to life and making it work. And it was a huge team effort that crossed the entire company and just, so many talented people doing such hard work to bring something that we all felt was going to transform the industry to life.
And talking about the operations of actually getting those locks on, hundreds of doors across the country and then later the world, something that I learned from you was that Starwood actually invested capital dollars into making that happen. Is that right?
We did. It was a big decision for the company because we had these, the Loft and Element owners had just built these properties. So, the ones that existed had only been around for a year or two. And so it was hard to go back to an owner and say, okay, now we want you to spend more of your capital to put money into changing all the door locks that you just installed. Right. And so, with Brian's help and under Fritz's leadership at that time, we did something pretty unprecedented from an internal company perspective, which is invest our own capital dollars in these franchise hotels to replace all the locks and make it work. And, W was a little bit of a different story, just because of the nature of the ownership, and many of them were managed, or even some were owned at that time. But W had a unique challenge in the sense that, Loft and Element were pretty standardized brands. So everyone was very similar. W, every single hotel was its own complete animal. So some had glass doors, some had metal doors, some had solid wood doors, some had hollow door, and so the types of locks that we had to put in to match the theming and design of those hotels, each one was a puzzle to make it work and to make the technology work with all the different door types that existed.
Yeah, it's so interesting because obviously key money is something that we talk a lot about in luxury hotel development, but less so in select service. And for those listening, key money is when a hotel brand or a company might give a hotel owner some money to put towards an initial build or a specific project or many other things, really meaning to incentivize that owner to want to work with that company as opposed to its competitors. And, I just think it's so interesting, this point that you've made that Starwood was actually willing to invest its own money into the select service brands as well, because it knew this technology was so important. And I wasn't aware of that because I kind of came into this project on more of the marketing and PR side of it, of course, which, I think is still one of the most fabulous launches we've ever done. And that's because we got to work with Apple. So I know you had a lot of really cool behind the scenes stuff with the Apple Watch launch, but I'd love to hear about that from your perspective.
Yeah, we were really fortunate. Years before keyless, Apple had come around when they first released the App Store, and they sent teams around to meet with, all sorts of companies in every industry, just to try and get an understanding, I think, of what companies were planning to do, with the iPhone as a platform, and what the future might look like for them and on the platform that they'd built. And I took that as a really, an invitation to create as deep a relationship as you can with Apple, which isn't known for doing, big partnerships or that type of thing. It really is, what was important is trying to build this shared understanding between Starwood and Apple on the similarities between our companies. So we were both design-led, brand-led companies. And that included things, it was a multi-year process, just getting to know each other, having their design team come in and meet with our designers. We had those beautiful model rooms, that were in our headquarters for each of our brands. And so taking them through that process, having our actual designers walk them through how they thought about it. Because I think outside the industry, there's this perception, when you open a hotel, you just, go to Container Store and buy some coat hangers for the closets and go to, a furniture store and get some dressers. But really, every single element of a hotel room is so considered, and everything is custom built to not just from a design perspective, but also from a functional perspective and from a wear and tear, perspective and durability. And so to see, that they actually design the coat hangers, that were in the closet to take through every single aspect that we considered for tied to a hotel stay, that really resonated with the Apple folks. And so the first time they had reached out to us was with the launch of the Apple Wallet, which was exciting for us to be kind of in the know and in that process with them. And then based on, our ability to not just deliver, but also keep a secret about what they were working on, that led to SPG Keyless and us working with them for the initial launch of the Apple Watch and being featured in the keynote. My favorite stories from that, I mean, we had a team, Stephen Gates and Bobby Schuckert, who basically had to live out at Apple headquarters for months. We didn't know if we were going to get them back. I mean, they were out there. and they would sneak over in the middle of the night to the loft that was in Silicon Valley and had a room set up with one of the locks where Apple personnel could bring devices to actually test and make sure that it was working. All of this before the keynote. So it was, it just added to the excitement, and obviously helped us from a marketing and PR perspective to be featured in a keynote when they were such big deals, and everyone was on them. But I do think, to mirror a point you just made, I mean, the PR side and all the efforts you and Maura did tied to that initiative were just incredible. One of my personal favorite stories is we had Maura and I were meeting Walt Mossberg, who was obviously a very prominent and famous tech journalist, to show him the technology. We were at the W in Washington, D.C., near his house. And he came over and we demoed the technology for him, and he got to use it. And he said, this is really neat and cool. But he immediately pivoted to, okay, I really want to talk about why there aren't more outlets in the rooms, and let's look at the outlets in this room. Like, where are the outlets to charge on my devices? Which led to Maura and I basically crawling, on the room with Walt Mossberg watching us, trying to find every outlet to show him. And by the time the demo was done, she and I both just collapsed, and she had the suite filled with like candy. And I just remember us eating so many gummy worms. Like we were under so much pressure. And just at that moment, we released it by eating all these gummy worms. So it was, that whole project, just from beginning to end, has so many great memories. And it was just, again, so many talented people from across the company coming together to make it work.
Yeah. And honestly, if that is not a good depiction of how challenging PR can be, that you have this incredible, cool launch story. And exactly as you mentioned, we had personalized the room so that when the journalists keyed in, their favorite movie was playing on the screen and their favorite candy was there, and all these, questions they had answered for us that they had forgotten about, just to show the power that the personalization could have in the future.
Absolutely.
And of course, we'd still have someone, being like, but what about the outlets? Which, fair point. We do need some outlets as well.
Yes. I do think the industry has largely solved that based on my recent stays. But at the time, it was just a curveball that caught both of us off guard. And but I think, Maura is such a pro. We handled it well, and
absolutely
turned into great coverage for all of our efforts.
Absolutely. And nowadays, some consumers, or maybe even most consumers, might be almost overwhelmed by the sheer amount of brands in the hospitality space. How do you think Starwood thought about each of its brands?
Well, I think, at Starwood, and I learned so much about brands and just what makes a great brand during my time there, because it really was such a core focus of ours. And, every one of our brands had intentionality. I'd say they each were meant to serve either a different market segment or a different guest segment. And each one had a strong purpose. And we spent so much time differentiating each of our brands down to, things. I mean, it's not, always the most cost-effective strategy when you just look at it on paper, but, having unique websites for each of our brands was something that even today, I don't know any hospitality company that still does that, right? Like Marriott, all their brands are under Marriott.com. Ritz-Carlton may be a little different. Hilton, they're all under Hilton.com. But we spent significant time and effort to make sure that even the digital presence for each brand was as unique as our brands were. And to us, that was important just because outside of the stay experience, the deepest engagement that a guest could have with a hospitality brand was through digital channels. So we wanted to make sure that differentiation carried through there. I still love the tests that we always used at Starwood that frankly, I don't think many brands could do today or pass today, which is cover up the logo, on an advertisement or a piece of collateral. And can you still tell what brand it is without the logo on it? And, that was a big part of all of our design efforts, was to make sure that it wasn't just, the in-room experience, it could be different, or the logo, but that actually carried through every single element, through the scent, through the food, through the welcome, through the stay. I mean, it was just, we wanted to make sure the brands were fully differentiated. And even then, Katie, we had 9 brands, on the way to more at Starwood, but most of our SPG members couldn't name all 9 of our brands.
Right.
They I think people in the industry often overestimate the amount of time that guests actually have to devote to actually understanding what the company is or what it does. Yeah. So if they couldn't do that with 9 brands, I know, with a Marriott or a Hilton or an Intercontinental where they have 30 plus brands each, it seems like, there's no way that their guests actually understand all the different brands that they have. So, but our brands, and look, there are a couple reasons hotel companies create so many brands. I mean, one is, when it does need like an extended stay brand or a specialty select brand or, a luxury brand, there are different market segments that brands will target. But then I think that's also not well understood outside the industry is the area protection clauses. When an owner signs an agreement to carry a brand flag, they want some protection that, the company's not going to open up another of that same brand next door to them that's going to siphon off some of the business. So as these brands grow and then the real estate opportunities become so much less, what the companies do is, to fuel their growth is they say, okay, well, let's create another brand. Right. And then that lets them continue to develop it and, put a lot more brands out in the marketplace.
The next time you're traveling or celebrating an important occasion, book a Flytographer photo shoot. They make it easy to capture memories by connecting you with hand-picked professional photographers in over 350 destinations around the world. I should know. Capturing memories with family and friends is super important to me, and I've booked Flytographers from Maine to Paris to London. A Flytographer shoot is an essential part of every trip I plan. They also have an incredible affiliate and travel advisor program. Add a photo shoot to your customer's next itinerary and earn 10% commission. Visit flytographer.com/sweet success for $25 off your first shoot or to sign up as an affiliate or travel advisor. That's FLYTOGRAPHER.com/sweet, like hotel suite success.
Yeah. I find it interesting what you're talking about, how Starwood really let its, 9-ish brands stand on their own. And maybe with the exception of, let's say, a Loft, which was a little bit more tied to W Hotels when it first launched, the company didn't really do the brand name by Starwood that you see a lot of the big hotel companies doing today. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that helps for the customers who don't know all 30 brands when you can tie it back to the mothership? Or do you think that waters down those individual brand personalities?
Yeah, I think people think it helps. I don't think that it really helps. Mm-hmm. I think it just creates more noise a lot. I think time would be better spent trying to actually have very differentiated experiences. Mm-hmm. And, the truth is a guest, doesn't need to know every one of your brands, right? They need to know the brands that are most relevant for them and that are going to help them have a great stay. So it just, to me, it kind of clutters it up. I mean, at Starwood, we were fortunate in the sense that, the company's name wasn't on any of our hotels, really.
Right.
There wasn't a quote unquote, a Starwood hotel. And so that let us use, the portfolio brand for all of our brands became Starwood Preferred Guest, which really put the loyalty program front and center. And that became the identifier to say, we're all part of this family of Starwood Preferred Guest, whether we're a hotel or whether you're a guest, we're all part of this big family together. And we're going to delight you as best we can with each of your stays.
Yeah. And Starwood Preferred Guest, or SPG, was the number one loyalty program in the industry while you worked on it. Something I thought it did really well was kind of stood on its own as a brand. I even remember internally having brand comms people working with you and your team just the same way that we were working with all the other brands across the organization. So can you talk a bit about the launch of that program and then how you continue to evolve SPG to make it that number one program in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, we were so fortunate at Starwood because the perception of SPG when I first came into the program, it was probably 2008, 2009 when I had my role expanded from focusing just on digital to also having the loyalty program. And up until that time, I mean, loyalty programs are viewed in the industry, or they used to be viewed, and this was definitely the case in the early days of SPG. It's something that the company was proud of, but owners, when times were good, people would be like, "Why do we need SPG? It's so expensive. Do you really have to have a loyalty program?" And of course, when we were in a recession or times were tough, then it was, "How SPG? Why aren't you doing more for me?" So, and we didn't view it as a brand; it was viewed as kind of a program, and it didn't have all that same positioning. So it was exciting, really, when Fritz came on board. I'll never forget the very first meeting we had with him on SPG, and he kind of cut me off a little bit in my initial presentation to him, and he said, "Oh, SPG, that's just free stuff. That's just free stuff we have to give away, right?" And I'm like, no, like it actually, I had a reaction to it because I'm like, that's not it at all. This is our relationship with our guests. This represents the actual relationship we're trying to build and sustain when people aren't in stay, between stays, to get them to come back. And I think, shortly after that meeting, I think Fritz had heard from a lot of his friends and others, like, well, don't do anything with SPG, like it's the best program, because his whole perception quickly changed. And it kind of, and so then he said, this really is a brand for us, and we need to treat it just like we do. It's not a hotel brand, but it's a brand as important as any of our hotel brands in the future of the company. And it kind of rose, with the advent of customer data and being able to leverage data and his focus and the company's focus on this personalization of that being key to driving memorable hospitality stays and really creating loyalty beyond reason. And so when you kind of viewed it under that lens, and you started to see how we could capture the elements that were really personal to our guests and things that were really important to them, and then share that across hotels so that we could continue to deepen the relationship with our best customers. That's where I think the real value of SPG was unlocked. And that was just an incredibly exciting transformation, culminating in programs like the Ambassador Program that Amy Weinberg and Mike English and Mark Vondrasek and others really spearheaded, that really delivered that exceptional service no matter where you stayed, based on everything that we knew about you.
Yeah. And explain a bit about the Ambassador Program for people who maybe weren't familiar with it.
The Ambassador Program was a really groundbreaking, I think it still exists in some shape or form at various companies, and other companies continue to mirror it, like Delta has Delta 360 now, which is a similar program. But it basically was looking to say, loyalty programs at that time were really focused on frequency. So a lot of how many stays you had a year, how many nights that you stayed with us a year. And so it was a program that took those guests that qualified for it, matched them up with a one-to-one relationship with someone in one of our contact centers who got to know them and was their one-stop contact for anything related to the company. They could go to them for advice, to help with stays, to help them understand what was going on in the market, to celebrate anniversaries. I mean, there are so many incredible stories out of that program, and the focus on really delighting these customers who were so important to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about loyalty. We've talked about digital, and something I want to pick your brain on is partnerships, because you talked a bit about the partnership between Apple and Starwood. I think that's a great example of a authentic, mutually beneficial partnership. And I know while you were CMO at Caesars, you led another great partnership, this time with the NFL. So tell us a bit about that one. And then I want to dive more into like your ethos on partnerships overall.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the NFL was an incredibly important partnership for us at Caesars, and really it coincided with. The NFL is a league. Truly is a league in and of itself, like alone. It's such a core part of America. People are so passionate about it. Everyone has their favorite team. Like, it really is just such a culturally dominant force. And at Caesars, we were really focused when PASPA was overturned, which kind of limited sports betting in the United States. We had partnerships previously with NFL teams because we saw they were a great way to drive business. For example, if we had a casino in New Orleans, and the Chiefs were coming in to play the Saints, or a team was coming in to play the Saints, we could bring our best customers from that market into New Orleans to go see their team play the Saints and have a great experience, or a hospitality suite. So it was a core. The NFL was a core way that we actually drove business and deepened engagement with our best customers on the gaming side. But with PASPA overturning, it really was and the Raiders coming to Las Vegas, which was something people thought would never happen. So football was coming into Las Vegas. The sports betting, we were at the advent of sports betting getting legalized in many parts of the country. And we just set our sights on having a very deep and integrated partnership with the NFL. And that started much the same way with Apple. They came into the market. They were meeting with all the companies. We rolled out the red carpet. I had Caesar and Cleopatra greet them, read a proclamation from Caesar welcoming the NFL. We had the room all completely decked out in NFL paraphernalia, and the partnerships that we had with the teams, we had those highlighted. And really that started a long process of just getting to know each other. The NFL was approaching gaming in a very thoughtful and considered way. And we wanted to be their partner to help teach them about gaming. And with the brand that Caesars had, we were their ideal partner, given that the largest gaming company in the United States, and one of the most admired and well-known brand in gaming.
Yeah.
And so that started this long partnership that culminated in things like the NFL draft coming to be at Caesars properties in Las Vegas, the Super Bowl coming to Las Vegas. There were a lot of factors for that, but that partnership enabled Caesars to be at the center of all of those NFL activities as they were moving into a new market and a new space. So it was just an incredibly deep and meaningful partnership for us. And the NFL is just, world class doesn't describe their organization. They are just incredible to deal with, much like an Apple. Just incredible partners.
Yeah. And what is it about partnerships that you think make them such a valuable brand building tool?
I think partnerships serve a lot of different functions. And, my philosophy has always been fewer, deeper partners. It's not about having, 100 partners. I'd rather have 10 that are very deeply integrated. And I think when you look at it from a brand perspective, absolutely. But from a customer acquisition perspective, from a retention perspective, there's just so much from a data perspective that partnerships can really add to your business if you choose the right ones. At Starwood, we were very focused on finding relevant partners that were within that travel experience. In great examples, we spent 5 years developing a very deep and integrated partnership with Delta, for example, which basically the fundamental assumption was a friend of yours is a friend of mine. When we looked at our best customers, we realized that many of our best customers weren't flying Delta, and many of their best customers weren't staying at Starwood. And so it became this reciprocal loyalty. How do we, it's not just about points and the rewards, it was about that recognition. How do we take someone who's really important to Delta, and because Delta is really important to us, we wanted to make them feel like they're really important to us too. And how do we each magnify each other's loyalty? And that was, groundbreaking and led to, it was not only, Delta's a great brand, so it was a great brand alignment, but it also, from a customer acquisition side and retention side, was really incredible, from what we were able to drive into the program and through that into our hotels. And we did that same level of very deep integration with Emirates in the Middle East, with China Eastern and China. So we found the one specific partner in the airline space to go deep with in each part of the world to help support all of our hotels and to bring that to life. And meanwhile, we did have more transactional relationships with all the other airlines because we're all part of the same industry. But we picked just a few to go very deep with and to stay focused on. And whether that was at Starwood, the key partners, Delta, Uber, American Express, obviously was a tremendous partner of ours, across the board. They just help unlock innovation, and help drive, great customer experiences.
Yeah. I really like what you said about like choosing the right one. And you gave such good examples of like, how do you actually do that? Like for Starwood, thinking about what's relevant within that travel experience and, really identifying those. I think that's a really good lesson for anyone in any industry, in any organization to say, okay, well, what's kind of within that world for my customer and who else makes sense within this space?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, it was so critical for us to find the right ones. And a lot of that comes down to who do you feel most comfortable dealing with? Like, do you trust the people on the other side? Do the companies have that shared culture, like what we tried to build with Apple? Delta and us, we definitely had that with each other. And it's about learning about each other's cultures and really focused on doing great things, staying focused on doing great things together. I'll never forget when we first started meeting with Delta, one of the first things they had us do was watch a movie that at the time, I think every new Delta employee had to watch, but it was on a horrific airline accident in Tenerife that was years ago. And their point in having us go through it just like a Delta employee would is to say our number one focus is safety, right? Mm-hmm. So we may take longer, we're going to be very thoughtful, but we never forget that we're flying thousands of people a day, 30,000 feet in the air, and safety is our number one focus as a company. And so that kind of informed and helped us get to that understanding of working with them, what was important to them, right. And how to bring it together. So it's, those types of experiences when you start a partnership are just so critical. And then the other, I think the mistake many companies make is, a partnership isn't a one and done thing. This is one reason that I'm such an advocate for fewer, deeper partnerships. Partnerships require staffing. They require continued focus. The last place any partner that was depending on us at Starwood or at SPG, I never wanted them to get and say like, well, what did we get from Starwood this year? Like, why are we even in this partnership? It takes that continued focus, continued effort, a lot of communication to just make sure that you both are staying aligned to what the actual core reasons were that you came together in the first place. And you're all still staying focused on delivering on that.
Yeah. Wow. Those are both so illustrative, especially the one about the airline crash video. It's funny, at the beginning of my career, I had interviewed to work in comms for an airline. And I'll never forget in the interview, they asked me about my experience in crisis communications. And I hadn't worked for Starwood or Marriott at the time. So my examples were limited, let's just say. And I remember the hiring manager looking at me and saying, the thing that keeps me up every night is planes falling out of the sky. Yeah. And it was such a sobering moment of, okay, those are your stakes. And, from my past in the fashion industry, the stakes were, potentially much lower. So it just, what an amazing tone setter that they did to say, like, here's what's really important to us first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're blessed that the airline industry is so safe today, and that focus that all the airlines have has made air travel just one of the safest ways to travel, and an incredible experience.
Yeah. So a big picture question for you before we get into the last 3 questions that I ask everybody. What are your thoughts on building customer loyalty in hospitality overall? Maybe predictions for the future, maybe just how people should be doing it, shouldn't be doing it. What are your thoughts?
I think that, I think we've been in a golden age of customer loyalty. And I think when you look, and part of it, I don't know if I should say this, Katie, but I'll just say it. When Starwood got acquired by Marriott, there was this incredible dispersal of talent that went across the industry. If you look at Hyatt, or Marriott, or Hilton, or Intercontinental, or these other hotel companies, there are so many people who started their careers or have a strong presence from that Starwood way. Yeah. And especially around loyalty. If you look at it, Marriott's program is led by a great Starwood alumnus. Hyatt's program's led by a great Starwood alumnus. So it's been great to see kind of the lessons that we all learned together at Starwood carrying on through people, continuing in their career and going to other places. And so it really is just an incredible network. It'll be interesting to see. I think loyalty overall is being a little eroded by the rapid proliferation of loyalty programs in general that we all have to deal with. I mean, again, people overestimate how much time people have to think about things like loyalty programs who aren't in the industry. And it's just, the average person can only remember 2 or 3, programs that they will remember. And, I think today when a business gets into a business challenge, they're just like, well, let's start a loyalty program. That's what we need. And that's not often what they need. Loyalty is a core concept every business should focus on to build better relationships with your customers or guests and to drive, to continue to deepen that relationship. A program isn't the only way to achieve that. And so it'll be interesting going forward as, if there are cost pressures on the industry or as these programs continue to grow, their ability to stay relevant and to continue on that path of really personalizing the stay and delivering something that's meaningful to people, because that's what they're looking for. They want something that's meaningful for them. At Starwood, again, another one of my favorite stories, we had a program called SPG Moments, which was delivering kind of once in a lifetime experiences to customers. And I'll never forget, it was actually in China, I think, but there was a Taylor Swift concert. And there was a dad who brought his daughter to the concert and was able to get access, a meet and greet with Taylor Swift, and to get a great seat through Starwood Preferred Guest. And I just will never forget the father who traveled 200 plus nights a year, right? Had all that anxiety being away from their family for so long, to drive for their career and everything. Seeing his daughter screaming out every lyric in the front and just tears coming down his face. That through all that travel and the sacrifice he made, that he was able to deliver something that his daughter would never forget.
Yeah.
And it's just, so even in those types of moments, again, loyalty can take so many different forms. And the Moments program wasn't always about a hotel stay, but it was always about creating a memory, something that would last a lifetime, and putting Starwood, as the enabler of that memory and the facilitator of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful story. And I think is a great example of how difficult this next question is going to be for you, because I imagine throughout your career, you have had a lot of fantastic experiences like that one that you just mentioned. But I'm going to ask it anyway. What was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
Okay, it's impossible to answer. As you know,
I knew it.
and you prepped me with that question. I've thought about it a lot. I mean, there are so many incredible hospitality experiences that I've been fortunate enough to have through work in the industry and just traveling around the world. I can think of great hotels like the Gritti Palace in Venice is probably my favorite hotel in the world. The Grand Britannia in Athens is just an amazing experience. And so many different things. But I come back to, something that one of the brand leaders at Starwood said to me once that really had a huge impact on how I thought about it. They said, a good hospitality experience is like having your friend over for dinner, right? Like when you have a friend over for dinner, you turn on the porch lights, right? Like if they're driving up at night, you make sure the lights are on so that they can know how to get in and get to your house safely. You plan the menu around their preferences. If someone's vegan, you're not going to serve steak, or at least you're going to have options for them. You try and take everything you know about that person and create a great experience for them. And bridging that between like what we all do in our personal lives with those who, our loved ones or friends or family, and what hotels can do or Airbnbs can do or bed and breakfast can do. I mean, that's what I think is important. It's a lot of it is the little things, right? Like a great room isn't a great hospitality experience in and of itself.
Right.
I was telling you, I just got back from a couple weeks in Europe, seeing family and friends. And, I started my stay at this little bed and breakfast in Leon Solent on the southeastern coast of England called Millville Corner. And I've stayed there a number of times. That's run by this really lovely couple, Steve and Angela. And they know when I'm coming in, they make sure I get the same room so I'm comfortable. They know what I like for breakfast at the bed and breakfast. So it's like breakfast is always perfect. It's just as, at Easter, they left me candy in the room, like the Easter bunny. I mean, it's just those little, very thoughtful touches based on the relationship that we've built that really made a difference to me. Now, when you think about, after I stayed there, I went and stayed at the new Raffles OWO at the old War Office building in London. And so that's a big luxury hotel. But still, the hospitality experience was incredible because every time I came into the hotel, the doorman would be like, "Welcome back, Mr. Holdren." Like, the staff had learned my name. The concierge was there with incredible recommendations. Like, it's that feeling like they had my back, that they were all committed to delivering this great experience, even though I was only staying there 3 nights. And I went from there to another hotel I'd been wanting to check out, the Cheval Blanc in Paris. And again, these are luxury hotels, so they should do this. But every element was so considered and thoughtful and based on what they knew about me that, it's not hard to create a great hospitality experience if you have the right people who actually care about it and who are focused on it. It's, again, to me, it's a lot of those little things that really make a huge difference. And it's not just a nice room.
Yeah, absolutely. And with what sounds like countless wonderful experiences, I'm now going to ask you the opposite. What was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Well, I've had a few, and again, as we travel around so much, I mean, several of mine would involve like food poisoning at a hotel restaurant or something.
Oh yeah,
so
I've been there.
Those tend not to be great hospitality experiences in general. Though the recovery can be a great hospitality experience, like if they do it appropriately and really and help you get back on your feet. But to me, the most disappointing ones are ones where, there are brands that are known for hospitality. But if they don't share, one of the things that I always find a big dissatisfier is, you can get to know a hotel and their team pretty well, through staying a few times. But when you go to another hotel in that brand, you don't want to feel like a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And so even some of the companies that are so well known for hospitality fail at that basic point. And you feel like, we used to talk about Sisyphus, in loyalty, it's all about Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. And then at the end of the year, when it's time to requalify, programs move the rock right down to the bottom of the hill again. And you have to start your push up the hill again. But, and how to try and mitigate that and avoid that. But when you get to know, you're staying not just with an individual hotel, you also are staying with that brand. And so I think it's imperative that the brands take what they know about you and share it with the other hotels in a way that they can act on it. So you're not starting at the bottom of the hill when you go stay at another one of their hotels. And it's frustrating to me and has led to a lot of, I wouldn't say bad, but just frustrating experiences.
Yeah. And last question for you, which you did touch on when you talked about the B&B in the south of England and even Raffles in London. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone or any brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Well, I don't know that hospitality can be truly mastered. I think there are definitely individual folks who run Airbnbs who are incredibly great at it. There are definitely, small hotels, that really have come close. But I think hospitality is something you can never get enough of it, right? Like it's, you want to feel when you're away from your home, and especially if you're in kind of an uncertain environment in another country or a place you haven't been before, you want to feel safe and secure and taken care of, and that someone's there to help you and has your back. And, I embrace all of it. Like I want these, hotels to get to know me and resorts and to be able to deliver something that's tailored to me, and it makes me feel truly at home and recognized by them. And so I think there's always more you can do, but, I don't know. I think individual hotels have probably come close to mastering it. I don't think any of the major brands have come particularly close yet, though many are well on their way. But
yeah. Well, Chris, it's such a pleasure to reconnect with you, to get to see you and chat with you again. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you, Katie. Really, it was a pleasure. And it's just been, hospitality is such an incredible career and such an incredible space. And there's so much more room for growth and innovation. And it's an amazing place to spend your time.
I couldn't agree more. All right, everyone, it's time for today's Sweet Summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Chris as much as I did. I thought that he made so many interesting points, starting with this. One thing that's generally underappreciated about the hospitality industry is that the people who work within it tend to be hospitable themselves. That has certainly been my own experience. And I think the amount of guests on this show who I've worked with in previous roles really proves that point. These are people that truly want to help and with whom genuine relationships have been built, no matter how long ago it was. I also liked his point about the global reach that the industry provides. It is truly unmatched and provides you with a network of colleagues and friends from all over the world. It's easier to see the bigger picture and to get out of the confines of our own day-to-days when we have people in our lives who offer a varied viewpoint. He talked a lot about brands and how the best brands have intentionality, purpose, differentiation. And I loved the quick test he shared for determining the strength of your brand. Can you cover the logo on an advertisement and still know who the ad is for? With all of his experience, I wasn't surprised to hear him say that the goal of loyalty is to build better relationships with your customers and your guests. But what did surprise me was when he said that building a loyalty program isn't the only way to do that. I knew he'd also have a lot of insights to share regarding the power of partnerships. He started by talking about how crucial it was to find the right partner, how you could look at the broader travel experience in Starwood's case to identify possible partners, but then look for a shared culture. He then said, "A friend of yours is a friend of mine." And what I liked about that was the recognition that just because someone wasn't a VIP customer of yours yet, didn't mean they couldn't become one. And more likely than not, if they are a VIP customer of your partner, well, then that represents an opportunity. He spoke about the need to do fewer, deeper partnerships, that this work isn't one launch and done. It takes staffing and continued focus. And that lastly, you never want to get to the end of the year and have a partner think, what have they done for me? Finally, my favorite takeaway from Chris is that good hospitality is like having your friend over for dinner. You make sure the porch lights are on, you plan the menu around their preferences, and you take everything you know about them into consideration in order to make their experience special. Because, as Chris said, you can never get enough of good hospitality. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.